Hey, welcome. So today we're diving into a really fascinating, kind of counterintuitive idea. What if the best way to hit your biggest goals is to actually stop aiming right at them? Let's unpack how that could possibly be true.
Right. Think about a big goal you have. The first instinct for most of us is to just put our heads down and charge straight for it. But what if that direct approach, that intense laser focus on the finish line, is the very thing that's setting you up to fail? What if it's a trap?
So check out this philosophy from George Merck. His company, Merck & Co., decided their main focus wasn't going to be the bottom line. Nope. They were chasing an oblique goal: serve people by making great medicine. And the profits? He was convinced they would just naturally follow if they did that one thing really, really well. Okay, now let's flip that coin completely. Here's the mindset of a major competitor, Pfizer, under John McCain. This is the direct approach, pure and simple. Every single thing we do, it has to make a profit. So you've got these two giants with two totally opposite ways of thinking. The results, as you'll see, are pretty surprising. And this is where things get really interesting, because this clash of ideas points to a weird pattern we see all over the place, in life and in business. We're going to call it the success paradox. It's this mystery of why taking the most obvious direct path so often leads you straight into a wall.
I mean, take happiness. The philosopher John Stuart Mill figured this out the hard way. He realized you can't just pursue happiness. It doesn't work like that. The truly happy people, they find it by the way, while they're totally lost in a project or a cause they care about or just helping someone else. It's something you find obliquely.
And what's wild is that this exact same paradox is true in business. When you look at the most successful visionary companies, the ones guided by a core purpose that's bigger than just making money, kind of like Merck, they paradoxically end up being way more profitable than the companies that only care about profit. So what is this powerful indirect force at play here? Well, it actually has a name, and it is the absolute key to this whole idea. It's called the principle of obliquity.
This name, obliquity, was actually coined by a scientist, Sir James Black, and this guy created enormous value for shareholders, but not because he was trying to. His motivation was the science, the chemistry. Obliquity is basically the art of knowing that for really complex goals, the path is never a straight line. It's more of a winding journey of trial, error, and discovery.
And if you want a perfect, real-world picture of this, just think about the Panama Canal. To get from the Atlantic to the Pacific, to travel west, ships have to first sail southeast. It makes no sense, right? The path that looks direct and obvious on a map is physically impossible. The weird, oblique, counterintuitive route is the only one that actually works. Now, to really get why obliquity is so powerful, we have to look at its enemy. We have to examine this super seductive but ultimately flawed idea of pure, top-down control. This is what we'll call the tyranny of directness, and it's why so many grand, ambitious plans just completely fall apart.
This quote from the legendary architect Le Corbusier really captures that spirit. It's this very rational, very confident belief that you can engineer a perfect solution for complex human stuff from scratch, just like you design a machine.
But just look at what happened. Visionary housing projects like Pruitt-Igoe, designed with all this rational efficiency, became totally unlivable nightmares. And why? Because a house is not a machine, it's a home. The planners completely ignored all the messy, unpredictable, oblique social things that actually make a community work, and the whole thing was a spectacular failure.
And this exact same kind of thinking took over the business world too. You had the re-engineering craze in the 90s, which was basically the corporate version of Pruitt-Igoe. The whole idea was, hey, let's just junk everything that's grown organically over the years and drop in a brand new, perfectly rational system from on high.
Okay, so now that we have this principle in our back pocket, let's circle back to those companies we talked about at the beginning and see how this all played out. This is where we see how obliquity works and how abandoning it fails in the real world. Okay, take ICI. This was once Britain's most successful manufacturer. For decades, their mission, their oblique purpose, was the responsible application of chemistry. Then, in 1991, they panicked and switched to a very direct mission, creating value for shareholders. And the result? The company went into a nosedive it never pulled out of until it just disappeared. The direct hunt for value is what actually destroyed it.
The story at Boeing is almost a carbon copy. Their oblique, passionate goal was to eat, breathe, and sleep the world of aeronautics, and it led them to dominate the entire market. But after a merger, they shifted to a direct, sterile, value-based environment, and they stumbled badly. They only started to recover when they got back to their real passion, building amazing planes. In both cases, the most shareholder value was created when it wasn't the main goal.
And if you're thinking this is just some fringe academic theory, get this. This quote is from Jack Welch. The guy who was the poster boy for the whole shareholder value movement for 20 years. And then, years later, he comes out and calls it the dumbest idea in the world. Even he eventually realized that profit is the result of running a great company, not the reason for it.
So what do we do with all this? How do we actually start embracing this indirect path instead of the direct one? Let's try to put all the pieces together.
So let's look at these two mindsets side by side. On the one hand, you have the direct approach. It needs clear, simple goals that never change. It assumes it has all the information. It's all about designing a perfect plan from the start. But then you have the oblique approach. It accepts that goals are messy and will probably change. It knows that our knowledge is always limited. It isn't a blueprint, it's a process of adapting and discovering as you go.
So why is this so critical? Well, because the world isn't some simple machine we can just figure out. It's complex. The results of what we do always depend on how other people react. Our knowledge is never, ever complete. And maybe, most importantly, our highest goals, whether that's happiness or building a great company, they aren't things we define at the starting line. They're things we discover on the journey.
So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. What's a huge goal you're chasing in your work or your life right now? Is it possible that the direct path you're on is a trap? And what amazing things might happen if, instead of just staring at the target, you focused on the process, on a higher purpose, and you let success find you, by the way.